quiet village of Ballymore, nestled deep in the Irish countryside, tales of the Banshee had always been whispered among the locals. These stories, passed down through generations, painted the Banshee as a mournful spirit whose wail heralded impending death. Sean O'Connell, a pragmatic man in his 30s, had heard these tales countless times growing up, but never paid them much mind. To him, they were merely folklore, stories to entertain or scare children. That belief changed on a cold, misty evening in late autumn. Sean was returning home from a long day in the fields, the setting sun casting an eerie glow over the landscape. As he walked the familiar path towards his cottage, the usual sounds of the countryside seemed oddly muted. The chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves were absent, replaced by an oppressive silence that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. As he approached the old stone bridge that crossed the river near his home, Sean's unease grew. The air felt thicker, colder, as if it carried the weight of unseen eyes watching him. He quickened his pace, his boots crunching on the gravel path, echoing loudly in the unnatural quiet. Suddenly, a sound pierced the silence, a wail so mournful, so filled with sorrow and pain that it froze Sean in his tracks. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around him like a chilling fog. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat a drum signaling his rising fear. He had heard about the Banshee's cry, but experiencing it was something entirely different. The sound was haunting, a blend of grief and rage that seemed to cut through the very fabric of the night. Sean's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the wail. The landscape, familiar yet alien in the dim light, offered no clues. He gripped the handle of his lantern tighter, the flickering flame casting erratic shadows that played tricks on his mind. Then he saw her. At the far end of the bridge, bathed in the pale light of the moon, stood a ghostly figure. She was draped in white, her long, flowing hair cascading over her shoulders, moving as if caught in an ethereal breeze. The wail came again, louder and more desperate, filling him with a sense of dread so profound it threatened to consume him. Sean's breath came in shallow, rapid gasps as he fought against the overwhelming urge to flee. He knew that if the legends were true, hearing the Banshee's cry meant that death was near, and not just for anyone, but for someone close to him. With every ounce of strength he could muster, Sean tore his gaze away from the spectral figure and willed his legs to move. He stumbled backward, nearly dropping the lantern as his body finally responded to his frantic mind. His heart thundered in his chest, and the cold night air burned in his lungs as he turned and fled the bridge. The wail of the Banshee continued to echo behind him, a haunting symphony of grief that seemed to follow his every step. As he ran, the once familiar path to his cottage felt like a treacherous labyrinth, each shadow and rustling leaf a potential harbinger of doom. His thoughts raced with a single desperate urgency. He had to warn his family. The tales had always spoken of the Banshee's cry as a death knell, and he feared for his loved ones. Bursting through the door of his home, Sean's frantic entry startled his wife, Maeve, and their 2 young children. Maeve's concerned expression deepened as she saw the terror etched on Sean's face. "Sean, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. He struggled to catch his breath, the words tumbling out in a panicked rush. "The Banshee. I heard her. She's here." Maeve's eyes widened in fear and understanding. They had both grown up with the same legends, the same warnings. The children clung to Maeve, sensing their parents' fear. Sean moved quickly through the house, checking every window and door, trying to ensure their safety, even though he knew deep down that no lock or barricade could keep out the harbinger of death. The oppressive sense of dread from the encounter lingered, suffocating him. He couldn't shake the feeling that an unseen force was closing in on them, a cold, inexorable fate that he was powerless to stop. Night fell heavy and silent around the cottage, and the family huddled together, each lost in their own fears. Sean sat by the window, eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the ghostly figure. The minutes dragged on, each one feeling like an eternity. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house settling. Suddenly, a faint, distant wail pierced the night. It was softer this time, almost mournful, but it sent a chill through Sean's very soul. Maeve tightened her grip on the children, whispering prayers under her breath. The wail grew closer, louder, and Sean felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. He knew they couldn't escape what was coming, and the sense of helplessness was overwhelming.